Less than 1 minute.
Everybody quiets down. I know, yeah. As soon as I see myself, and then I'm already. 15 seconds. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our regular council meeting for March 21st, 2022, the second day of spring here. So far, so good, yeah. At this time, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional territories and the oral practices of the Blackfoot Nation, which include the Siksika, the Kainai, and the Piikani. We also acknowledge the Tsuut'ina, the Stoney Nakoda First Nations, the Métis Nation Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. We are making this acknowledgement to demonstrate our continuing efforts to work together as we strive for reconciliation through increased and collective learning. Moved by Councillor Woodrup that the agenda be adopted. All those in favor? Carried. Moved by Councillor Nesbitt that the minutes from the regular council meeting held March 7th, 2022 be approved. Any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Carried. Moved by Councillor Idris that the January-February 2022 RCMP reports be accepted as information. Staff Sergeant Yetman, if you want to approach here, please.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. So, as you have alluded to, I brought with me the reports for January and February. I wasn't unable to make it for February's meeting, unfortunately. I got sent somewhere else at the time. So what I'll do is I'll present those stats first, or those that report first. If there's any questions arising out of the stats with which have already been provided, please let me know. Okay, so for January 2022, Brooks Detachment members responded to 331 municipal calls for service. A total of 12 prisoners were lodged in detachment cells. There were 63 municipal criminal record checks completed and a total of 30 violation tickets issued within the city, and that's separate from any enhanced traffic shifts that were completed. So. Some significant files that we had, miscellaneous calls from January. January 1st, 2022, members dispatched to a house fire in the city of Brooks. Fire and EMS were also on scene, determined that one of the occupants of the residence was unaccounted for. Unfortunately, that resident was located inside, deceased. Fire was believed to have been non-suspicious in nature. January 2nd, Brooks RCMP members were dispatched to a two-vehicle collision right in the city. During the investigation, it was determined that a third vehicle had been involved and had fled the scene. The occupants of the vehicle that had been struck advised that the driver of the third vehicle had struck them intentionally. Numerous charges were laid against a 40-year-old female resident of the city of Brooks. Charges include 2 counts of assault with a weapon, dangerous driving, fail to comply with condition of release order, and failing to remain at the scene of a collision. So fairly substantial charges arising from that. On January 10th, 2022, Brooks RCMP were advised that 2 females were on social media showing people that they had made fake vaccination certificates. These certificates had apparently been used to gain access to restaurants. No charges laid. Unfortunately, there wasn't enough evidence in that one to support charges. So I just thought I'd throw that one in there because it seemed to be quite a hot topic at the time. So staffing situation, we've got 2 corporal supervisors that have been identified. We've got one that has already come here and purchased a house. And he's moving here from Chilliwack, BC. So he should be landing sometime, we think, May or June timeframe. Then we have a another member that was recently promoted, and we don't have a date on their arrival yet, but they are coming. So we've also got a new member arriving from Depot. Actually, they graduate today, so they should be on their way here very soon. If we move on to the crime gauge, we'll see total criminal code offenses a 21% decrease, January to January 2022 versus 2021. We do have a bit of an increase in persons crimes, 11% increase. Property crime was down 13%, and other criminal code 64% decrease. Selected property crimes, break and enters, 5 fewer instances. Theft of motor vehicles, which I'll touch on again here shortly, have gone up. And theft under 5,000, 6 fewer instances. So we've had a decrease in those. Then what I'll do is I'll just move on to a couple of things here that are presenting as issues. You have the stats in front of you there, but I'll go to the page that's marked Brooks Municipal Detachment Crime Statistics Actual, January 2018 to 2022. So this one here will identify if anything is becoming an issue. You'll see that one of the biggest issues right now is an increase in auto theft, which we are working on even as we speak, making sure that if vehicles are stolen and then subsequently recovered, that we're conducting an investigation with an eye to finding out who it was that actually stole the vehicle in the first place. Moving on down, we have some that are listed as an issue, but it's a result of an increase of 1 in break and enters and an increase in 2 of mail theft. While an increase of 2 where we had no mail theft before would appear to be a bit of an issue, 2 mail theft is not uncommon. And that could be theft from a mailbox, one of those super mailboxes in the rural areas or whatnot. Well-being checks have jumped. We had 6 last year and we're up to 16 this year. Many factors go into that. Factors would include, we've also got a bit of a corresponding increase in Mental Health Act. So some of these well-being checks could be in relation to Mental Health Act calls. They can also be in relation to, the fact that we've been dealing with COVID and whatnot, and restrictions are lifting, and people are wanting us to check up on their loved ones and people that they haven't heard from in a bit. So we go out and we do that. Those have all gone without incident as well. A couple more in terms of traffic. We had speeding violations were up by 3 from previous year, and pursuits were up by 1. So we went from 0 pursuits last year to 1 pursuit this year, which is not uncommon for a city this size. Are there any questions arising from that report?
Yeah, go on to the next month.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Okay, so this will be statistics for the month of February 2022. Brooks Detachment members responded to 361 municipal calls for service. A total of 8 prisoners were lodged in detachment cells. There were 93 municipal criminal record checks, checks completed. A total of 35 violation tickets were issued in the city. Significant events, miscellaneous calls from February 2022. From February 1st to the 6th, Brooks members participated in Operation Cold Start. Incidentally, it wasn't really that cold during that time frame, but we participated anyway. And that was an initiative to educate drivers and owners of motor vehicles on the risks involved in leaving their vehicles running to warm them up. Each member had informational pamphlets to hand out to drivers and owners explaining the risks. In total, 23 vehicles were located during the project, idling with keys inside and doors unlocked. 16 vehicles were located idling with keys inside with the doors locked, and 22 interactions with owners and drivers were conducted. So that was a fairly successful project. We were able to identify vehicles who were being left unattended and notify the owners that they were unattended and why they shouldn't be left that way. So February 2022. So as you'll know, probably noticed, we didn't have any files that really stood out. Everything was pretty, I hate to say it in policing, but for that month, everything was fairly routine. February 2022, members were required to ensure public safety during 5 slow-rolling convoys through the city of Brooks and along Highway 1 past Brooks. Members maintained communication with the organizers to ensure the events occurred in a safe manner. During one of these events, on February the 5th, 2022, members had to respond to a 3-vehicle collision in which a vehicle traveling a highway speed collided with the rear of a pickup traveling well below the posted speed. The force of the collision also caused damage to a slow-moving tractor. 2 persons were transported to hospital as a result of that collision. From February the 1st to the 28th, Brooks RCMP responded to a total of 9 complaints under the Mental Health Act in the city of Brooks. All of these calls were resolved without incident. Brooks members also responded to 3 reports of missing persons, all of whom were located. Members also completed 8 well-being checks within the city of Brooks. And again, staffing I've got on here, it's the same as I just read you about the 2 corporal supervisors coming in and the member arriving from depot here shortly. For the crime gauge, January to February 2022 versus 2021. Persons crimes down 5%, property crimes up 10%. Other criminal code, 72% decrease. Total criminal code offenses saw a 20% decrease. Select property crimes, break-and-enters were down, 8 fewer occurrences. Theft of motor vehicles, 6 more instances, and 20% decrease in theft under 5,000, with 5 fewer offenses occurring. You're going to notice within the statistics on this one as well that auto theft was also an issue for us in the month of February. Again, break and enter to residence, we saw an increase of 1 over a previous period. And speeding violations were up by 6 over the same period back in 2021. So speeding violations are dealt with through traffic enforcement. So that's the stats and the reports that I have for you. Are there any questions?
Councillor Wardrop.
Thanks for your report.
No problem.
I have a couple questions for you. So as we see the trends decrease, are those, like when we were seeing these significant increases, it was trends related to COVID. Is this now correlated to the COVID restrictions coming off, or is this a provincial trend that we're also seeing?
So the trends you're referring to, are you referring to the decrease?
The decreases now, yeah,
decrease?
because before we were seeing significant increases kind of across the board.
Yeah, you know, there could be any one of a number of explanations for it, to be honest with you. I mean, we are seeing a significant decrease in, you know, the number of property crimes per se. You know, and I think, to be honest with you, that is being influenced by something else and not necessarily, say, the, you know, not necessarily the restrictions being lifted. Because what we saw when the restrictions came on, we found that the number of crimes being committed had actually trailed off.
Right.
And now with them being lifted, we're seeing a decrease still. So, it, you know, it's an encouraging trend, but one for which I don't necessarily have a good explanation, because traditionally what happens is when you get into the nicer weather, so I mean, maybe we had weather during these 2 months that was a little bit colder. I believe there was a a cold snap or two in there. That could potentially account for it. I'd also like to say maybe increased visibility on the roadways and whatnot within the city. But generally, what we see with the nicer weather coming up is we will see a bit of an uptick in offenses of that nature, so, yeah.
My next question is about the graffiti issue around town. Have you made any progress in that regard?
You know what, we're still actively working on that. At this point in time, I can't really say where we're at in the investigation. We are proceeding with it, so that's about all I can say at this point. I don't want to say too much.
Anecdotally, I've noticed less around town. Can you tell us if there's been a decrease in new cases of graffiti or reported?
I think within the last month, we have seen a bit of a decrease in that. How much of a decrease, I don't know, because that would be taken into account part of this month as well.
Okay.
But I think that, again, we have upped visibility in certain areas, which may be playing into that somewhat, so.
Thank you. I have one more question for you.
For sure.
About the motor vehicle theft trends. Are we still kind of along that provincial, is it still a provincial trend, or now are we to the point where we're kind of on our own, we've got our own problem happening?
Yeah. You know,
It's just troubling to see it continue to rise.
Yeah, and I hate to say it, but I think at a certain point, we did kind of pull out ahead a little bit, though it is going on all across the province. We are actively investigating those as well, and I have to say that, and I can present this in March, but early in March, we did make some significant progress in those investigations. So, and I'll have more for you at the next meeting on that. I'll have all the details.
Thank you.
I was surprised to see how many people are still leaving their keys in the vehicle running unlocked.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, there's a high number there, yeah.
And it is, and I mean, unfortunately, as we all know, I mean, vehicle thefts are a target of opportunity for criminals. And, you know, when they walk by and they see a vehicle, even the vehicle that's locked with the keys, I mean, all they got to do is break that window and get in and drive away. You know, it's only going to keep an honest person out. So, yeah, I mean, the best practice that you can be involved in is just, you know, if you can keep a vehicle inside in a garage, do that. If you have to idle your vehicle outside, I would suggest standing there in the window and watching it. I mean, you know, there's no guarantee that it's not going to be stolen if it's running out front.
Yeah. Any other questions, Councillor Idris?
On the second page of the statistical reports in both months, under the total federal, I think there is some sort of a calculation issue there. The numbers do not, the total is not, so either there are some categories that are missing.
Yeah, okay, so when you're talking the total federal on page 2, that encompasses the two categories above it, so the cannabis enforcement and the federal general, right?
So then the total doesn't.
Just let me see here.
In both months, in January?
Yeah, so with cannabis enforcement, there was 0. And with the the general federal, and now federal can be, you know, things related to aeronautics. It can be what falls under the realms of federal serious and organized crime. It could be shipping, things like that. So, yeah, those numbers, so the numbers for 2022 for both of those categories would be at 0. So I do know that, you know, we've got NAs in there. Now, I see total federal, a drop of, yeah, so it's saying a reduction of 80%, 2018 to 2022.
So for example, if I go with February, for example,
Yeah.
the cannabis is 0, for February.
Okay.
And then the federal general is 0, and then the total is 2.
Okay, just,
And that goes for the whole line.
total federal. Right, and so just, yeah, so I think, so this probably is laid out in not the most user-friendly manner. So the top 4 categories, drug enforcement, so production, possession, trafficking, and other, and drug enforcement, they're also federal offenses,
Okay,
federal
okay,
statutes.
okay.
So really, so they add up total for the drugs, and then they add in cannabis enforcement, and then the general federal underneath. So actually, the total would be the first 6 lines of,
So that's the total of the 6th line, not only the 2 lines. So-
it is. And like I said, it's probably not the most user-friendly, and I have had times where I've become quite frustrated with the stats myself, but yeah, so that's how that would read.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you for your time there, Staff Sergeant Yetman.
I did have one thing.
Oh, go ahead,
Before I left. So we're currently in the middle of our community consultation period leading up to the new fiscal year for our APP. So we're giving thought now to the priorities that are going to be going into the annual performance plan. So we've sent out a survey via SurveyMonkey, and we're also going to be holding a town hall on the 29th here in the city over at the JBS Center. So that's going to be our public consultations. I guess what I would like is maybe for council to think about what priorities would be important to them. So when I appear at the next meeting, perhaps we might have an idea of council's priorities as well. So if that's something you could give some thought to between now and then, that
Yeah,
would
we
be
certainly can, yeah, thank you.
For
Well,
sure.
thanks, yeah. And the meeting is Tuesday, March 29th, 7 PM at the JBS Canada Center.
It is.
Right, okay, perfect.
Awesome.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, good afternoon. Okay,
Thank you.
to the motion there, all those in favor? Carried. Okay, Mr. Erickson, if you want to come forward here, please. I'll read the motion ahead of time here. Moved by Councillor Prentice that the economic impact of the Brooks Pistol Club presentation be accepted as information. Rick Erickson, if you want to introduce yourself, I just introduced yourself, but your company with you there.
Yes, indeed. Yes, good afternoon, and Mr. Mayor and councillors. Thank you very much for this opportunity to present to you the findings of a report, the economic impact of the Brooks Pistol and Small Bore Club. I think you're going to be a little surprised at just what a wonderful asset you have here in Brooks. It serves not only the local area, but the whole of the province. My name is Rick Erickson. I'm an economist. I'm also the principal of RP Erickson and Associates. We're economic consultants based in Calgary. Joining me today is Stacy, the president of the Brooks Pistol Club, and a long-serving member director as well, Ed as well. We have presented a copy of our report to the mayor, a paper copy of it, and I should say too, it's a public document, and if the City of Brooks would like to use some of the findings in our document in any of your economic development work, any of your promotional work, or presentations that you're making, you're more than welcome to do so. The report will be put on the Brooks Pistol Club website as well too, and we're trying to get as much of this fairly positive information out to as large an audience as we can. I should say too, I'm also a shooter, and I have been for quite a while participating in events at the Brooks Club. And it was very easy. The study we did pro bono, we did it in support of the club. I'm very impressed at the quality of the Brooks Pistol Club as a whole. It is a template throughout this province, and we shoot all across the country as well too, for many other different kinds of clubs. It's how a club could and should be run. Very friendly, safety, 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 of course, is our mantra. And it's got just a fabulous location next to the wonderful amenities of Brooks. This club here in Brooks is by far, within Alberta, I belong to a larger organization called Ipsec, International Practical Shooting Confederation. They're a provincial organization. We shoot all across the country. There are associations in every province. We shoot internationally as well, too. The Brooks facilities here, the hotels, the restaurants, the proximity of the club, and the ease of access makes it stand out above any other club in the province. It is by far one of the very, very best resources that we as shooters are able to enjoy. And as I say, with the amenities here as well too, the variety of hotels that are offered, the number of different kinds of restaurants and the like, it truly is exceptional, which is why it has been quite successful with competitive shooters throughout the province. So we have done an economic impact study. I think the council's probably aware of what an economic impact study is. We want to show what the value in dollars and cents of this facility to your community. So what exactly do we try to measure in an economic impact analysis? What's important to us? Well, clearly jobs. We're looking at how many jobs does, and the club itself, as I will show, creates a fair amount of revenue for the town itself. And we'll break some of that down for you. And attached to that revenue, of course, are things like jobs. Labor income is also very important because, as you're probably more than aware, people who live in the city, earn in the city, tend to spend 75, 85, even 90% of their labor income. They spend where they live. The contribution to GDP is important because there's a rippling of effects here. We have a so-called direct impact. That is, the frontline support that the revenues are creating. The indirect impact comes out of the support services that are supporting the frontline people. Think, for example, the fast food places. They have materials that they are selling, and those suppliers are providing those materials. So the indirect effect comes out of the suppliers. The induced activities come out of the spending of both the direct employees and the indirect employees. So people at the fast food places, they need to get their hair done, they want to go to the movies, they have to get their car fixed. That is a so-called induced activity. I used to teach it in a university environment one time, and believe me, this was a year-long course. I could probably spend a month on the so-called rippling effect of activities in an economy. Fortunately, the Conference Board of Canada has a very, very good model. The team model, tourism evaluation model that they use. I don't create any models myself because no one's heard of R.P. Erickson and Associates beyond a very small little circle, and why would you believe in my model? So I go to the conference board, their root of their model is in StatsCan. So why do we take these studies? Well, exactly why we're sitting in front of you today, a very effective communications tool. Also, they can be a great baseline of which you can measure measure the future against, particularly if you've made an investment and you want to see 2 or 3 years down the road, what did that investment do for our facility? So here's what we found. And all of this material comes out of the last calendar year. Typically, we do these studies on a calendar year basis. We like to get the most recent one we can. So this is the data coming out of 2021. Now, admittedly, this has been a bit of a challenge with the pandemic, especially on the modeling. So what I've done on this is the Conference Board of Canada has not created a pandemic model. Why would they? It's such an anomaly. I went back and used the model from 2019. We have that one. We have a fair amount of confidence in that. It's a very sort of a standardized process, and 2019 wasn't a really exceptional year, not unlike the past two with the impact of the pandemic. So here's what we found. One of the biggest revenue generators of the range are non-resident visitors, and I'm, for example, one of them. The club in 2019, well, pardon me, the club in 2021, last year, provided 4 very large events, 2 sort of sized events with about 120 shooters, and then 2 more that had roughly 200 shooters at it. So we identified shooters come, of course, not just by themselves. They often bring their families. Sometimes they bring their children. So we had, on those 4 events, about 1,060 non-resident shooters that arrived here in Brooks, accompanied with their friends and colleagues and like, and attended these events. Most of them were 2 days. One of the events, the so-called Ipsec Provincials, was a 3-day event. Now, another part of the revenue generation of the range comes out of the operational expenditures of the range itself. So obviously, I'm sure you're very familiar with operations, maintenance, on-site construction, match-related expenses and the like. However, you have got some little industries that have popped up here because of the range. In fact, my colleague is one of the larger reloaders in the whole of the province. I would estimate that Ipsec, Alberta, in his firm, he probably generates about 20% of the total number of rounds that we fire in that group. That business is based right here in Brooks, and there are some employees in that business as well. You've got a local gun shop here that really likes the fact that the range is located, has consequential revenue sales coming out of that. There are some other supply vendors providing the bric-a-brac that we use in this business. Next. So here's what we found. We added up those 2 sums, was around 770,000 or thereabouts. We put it into the impact model, and this is what it told us. The direct impact, the front line of that, 6 full-time equivalents on a 37.5-hour work week. Labor income was roughly $230,000. Other expenditures beyond just simply labor that those companies were having to spend to stay in business was another $287,000. That created total direct impact of $515,000. Now, when we run that through the so-called rippling effect coming out of that team model, that number bumps up by roughly a half. So for every dollar we're spending as non-residents and the club is spending on its O&M and the like, there's another sort of 50%, 50 cents on that dollar being created in the rippling. So you can see that that range is now creating, for the economic well-being of Brooks, about a little over $1 million, almost $1.1 million coming out of that facility itself. Next. Now, we wouldn't normally include this in an economic impact study, but I think your economic development people might find this interesting. Although we're shooters, I would hazard to say that probably most of the kinds of tournaments that you would have here, where you're attracting non-residents to come and participate, conferences, this sort of thing, I suspect that the numbers would be fairly similar, the percentages. The overall numbers would differ somewhat, but I suspect the percentages would be fairly close to this. So because in our survey work, we ask this, I thought it'd be interesting to present that to you as well. So basically, the groups, so of that 1,060, the medium was about 2.8, 2.9, people in that group. So there are quite a few individuals that will come. There are couples that will come. As I say, sometimes they have 3 or 4 in their group. And those, the average spend per group is over $500. And then you can see it becomes less after that, depending on just what those people want to have on their stay. Many folks want to come and enjoy themselves. They want to go out for a nice dinner. They don't mind spending a little bit of money. Shooters, if you think the accommodation is expensive, you should try the shooting part of it. Typically, to do what we do, you're looking at probably a minimum of about $2,500 to get started, and you can spend well over $10,000 on a firearm. So the going out and participating at these different ranges abroad or within the province is it's not a cheap sport by any means, and it's just something that we accept in terms of the fun we get out of this. Next. So if we look at how they spend the money, and again I would offer, I think any ball tournament would be something similar to this to people that are showing up. Accommodation, a fairly large part of it. Prepared food, this is either restaurant or takeout. You can see 31%. Surprisingly, fuel. People come here, they buy gas because they're obviously coming from somewhere else. I would say the fuel sales alone are probably about 25,000 liters of fuel gets bought here by these people showing up. Light sundries would be things like, we need a sleeping bag, we only brought 3, and we need a 4th one, so let's go to Canadian Tire, or gee, my lawn chair broke. So light sundries tends to be retail sales, but another surprising part here are the capital expenditures. People have come here and they've bought bigger items. Recreational ATVs, a couple in that number, that capital spending was $62,000 got spent here in capital expenditures. The biggest breakdowns there were 2 ATVs, a pickup truck was also in there, I think a snowblower and a lawnmower. So I'm just saying, shooters are spenders, and when they're in your community and looking around, hey, there's more here than just simply going to the range. And the light sundries would be essentially your retail sector in the box store type thing. Next. When we look at accommodation, where do people typically stay? Well, you've got a nice selection here of what I call, the chain hotels. You've got 3 or 4 of them. They're all quite comfortable and nice, and obviously most people want to stay somewhere nice-ish, and they stay there. You've got some also smaller motels, family-run ones. They're popular too. Camping, because the range allows people to come on and camp there, so I think most of the camping goes on the range. And other would be, some people do Airbnb, bed and breakfast type places is involved there too. When we look at how they spend their money, and this isn't quite labeled correctly, franchise would be eat-in. So again, you've got a nice selection here of really, good quality eat-in places. So almost half the money gets spent there. Fast food are the Timmy's and the A&W's and this sort of thing, where you might have breakfast there, you might take it out. But it's not quite as much as a sit-down as the big franchise places. Your ethnic restaurants are also very popular, and I can say the Indian one goes over really well. I'm in there from time to time, and I see many other shooters in there as well, too. So again, I'm just saying that the base of the shooters that are showing up here they're enjoying a lot of the amenities that you have as a whole. Some people, live out of convenience stores and gas stations, and then I think the campers are probably in the grocery stores as well, too. Next. Okay, now there's an economic value to the range, but there's also a social value, and it might not be overly obvious, and it is another attribute that the range is bringing to your community. One of the things is volunteerism, and this is one of the reasons why this is a template type range, because they have such strong volunteer base. They make it, and if you're not sure quite what we do, it's competitive shooting, you're coming onto a range. There is a course of fire that has been set up in advance. We've moved a long ways away from just sitting there and bullseye shooting a paper target. No, we actually run around with a firearm on our hip, and you're moving through a course of fire where there are different obstacles. There's things you can't see. You can't see targets until you move somewhere else. And so there's quite a bit that goes into setting a match up. Typically, we would have here, normally we have 6 stages we would normally shoot for a regular match, but the provincials can be as many as 15 or 18 stages, and they must be set up in advance. That's all done by volunteers. So you can see here, you've got a group of like-minded people who get together, have fun, enjoy themselves, sense of community, at no cost to any level of government. Obviously, they're furthering the shooting sports for local residents here. To have a facility that handy means that they don't have to go to Tabor, they don't have to go to Calgary, they don't have to go to Edmonton to go shooting. The club is also very active in youth and also ladies shooting and firearm training. And I'm going to underscore how important it is for youth, because obviously if you're out on a range with a firearm, that's a very serious position to be in. And the training that goes into safe firearm handling is utmost, and I think a lot of youth, they take that elsewhere in their lives and careers. So we're always really encouraged when we see youth out on the range, and this club has got a very active youth program. Local hunter education, safe firearms handling courses, as you're probably aware, the federal government requires that you've taken a safety firearms course to be able to buy firearms, and that is available here locally, again, for your residents not having to go elsewhere to find that kind of an asset. Police and conservation officers have to do a variety of training, including certification requirements. This is often done on either an annual or semi-annual basis, and the range being right here is attractive. You've got other police forces as well as your local ones coming and using the facility as well. They've also, as I say, the club is really attractive in terms of just the amenities it has. And I think, and Stacy, correct me on this, you've got around 650, 700 members? No.
Last year, I think we had 330.
Sorry, 330.
Yeah.
And of that, probably 20% are from Calgary.
Yes.
Yeah, it's surprising. Because of the quality of the range, people will come here from quite a ways away. And I was a little surprised at just, how many people came to this range from Calgary itself. And something else that we always admire, although it's been a little bit of a challenge with the pandemic, of course, the Brooks Food Bank often come out. We need to have lunch. Shooting is a hungry business. And often the Brooks Food Bank will be out with their volunteers and like providing lunch, obviously for a donation or a fee to the food bank itself. And they have been a long-term charity, if you will, of the club. Next. So we want to point out that you have a fantastic facility here. You could do more. I know the club is very keen, and you're going to see some of the improvements have been made out there. If we look at something like the Ipsec Nationals, it's a much, much bigger event. There would be roughly 450 is what we have at a national event. We have to divide that up against the whole of the country, so Alberta shooters would be at the most, we'd be limited to about 50 out of that 450. And it's a 4 to 5 day event. It's 20 odd stages. And some of the attractions there, obviously people from elsewhere in the country, they're higher per diem spends than Alberta shooters would be. And there's an opportunity as well for someone to stay maybe an extra day or two in your community and just see some of your tourism amenities. We're not quite at that stage yet with the range. They can do a provincial, say a 14, 16 stage event. But to do a 20-stage event, we'd have to have a couple more bays. And we just did a lucent, back of the paper analysis of that. Just holding one of those events would be about $1.15 million left in your community. Now, there are more than just Ipsec. We're one of the shooting organizations in the country. There are, as you can see, 4 other ones. And they do all the same sort of things that we do. You have a Steel Challenge happens here as well. It's on a smaller scale than the Ipsec is. And USPSA, it's an American variation. It happens here as well too, but on a fairly small scale. All of these organizations have national level events and are looking, like any conference group, to move around in the countryside to make it interesting for their members to visit other parts of the country. So I see that as being a very viable opportunity for this range. And other than the big BTSA range west of Calgary, I don't know that there's much other competition in Alberta for these kinds of events that Brooks would find itself in. Next. So in summary, what do we have here? Well, I would say, if you're taking 3 or 4 events, items out of this presentation, you got 9 full-time jobs that range creates in your community. More than $1 million of GDP activity. You've got retail sector supported as well too, and it always surprises me when I do these kinds of studies to look at the capital spend and realize that, yeah, shooters are spenders, and they're looking for deals, they're looking for particular, items and like, and you have those for sale here as well too. So other of your businesses are benefiting from this that have nothing to do with firearms. You saw the social benefits I think are fairly realistic as well too. And it's just another vehicle for you in terms of diversifying your economy. So next. Now we have a little picture report here, and I'll let Stacy speak to this. The club has just built, it's just barely got the new roof on it, if not paint in it. A brand new clubhouse has been added to the facility.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. So it's pretty much 90% complete. Armor Building Systems came out and built this for us. We've been saving probably 4 years to build this from what we had before. Yeah, it's quite exciting to have a new facility, and everybody's happy to have it or be able to come to it. So just a few pictures here of it. So there's the inside. We got all PVC wall up in there. So yeah.
Okay, so once again, thank you. We are more than happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions? Councilor Nesbitt?
I don't have any questions, that I have shot there and I thought it was a great place. Gets you excited firing off those guns there. I really enjoyed it. I'm not a very good shot, but it was fun going anyways.
Good thing.
I can see why you're very adamant that you want to keep this going very strong.
Indeed. Well, you know, James Bond and John Wayne and the like make pistol shooting look really, really easy. And the guys on TV, you know, are out there running around. They don't even use the sights. Believe me, pistol shooting is incredibly difficult.
I was really surprised how bad I was.
Yep, it is, it is a challenge, and you must do an awful lot of practice to get good at this. Now, the beauty of the game we play is that there's a challenge there, there's a course of fire, and different shooters shoot it differently. And to go in and make your plan and run through that and have your plan work, all the while being safe, is a real feeling of satisfaction and enjoyment.
I was going to, Stacy, I think you were at our council probably pre-pandemic, and you were going to host a major event. I don't think that ever happened because
No,
of the
never,
pandemic.
no.
Do you have any other big, I know you're talking about a national event or trying to host that. Do you have any other big events that you guys are planning?
Well, we have a 32 special coming in August, and that's about 200 people,
Yeah.
but nothing like a national event.
But you're aiming to try to,
Yes.
you said you have to sort of build a few other things.
Yeah,
to
we
get
need
your-
at
the
least
national-
3 more bays to host that,
Okay.
so.
The other question, and I think you'd mentioned Calgary has a club, but Brooks has one. How many clubs like this in Alberta and southern Alberta?
Well, I would say just offhand, the ones that we shoot, Tabor has a range.
Yeah.
Lethbridge has a range. The Lethbridge facility is a little compromised. It's a little kind of close to town, and there's a bunch of NIMBYs that are not very, very happy about it. So I'm not sure what its future is going to be. We don't have anything, we don't ever hold any events at Medicine Hat. I don't know if they have a range or not, but it's just not well enough equipped for organizations like ours to come and shoot. There is certainly at Calgary, as I say, at Sibbald, it's provincial lands there. There's about 7 or 8 different gun clubs that are in that, and there's a very big pistol club there as well, too. Not surprisingly, Calgary's so close. I think our friends at Vulcan have a very slender range. We're trying to encourage it because what's happened with our organization is we have more members and more shooter wannabes than we have the ability to have facilities for them to go shoot. So we're trying to encourage other ranges to start up. And what we're doing is we're loaning equipment from different ranges. You know, again, to have a proper full-blown match, you're probably looking at about $15,000 or $20,000 worth of equipment that you need to go and shoot it. And a lot of wannabe startups just don't have anywhere near those resources. Obviously, it has to goes through a provincial sanctioning circumstance as well too, to make it legal. So not everybody can have their range. It's lots of backstops. I mean, there's a lot of construction that has to go into making a facility safe. So I would say, yeah, in southern Alberta, there might be 5 ranges, but again, and that would be Red Deer South.
Yeah.
Rocky Mountain House would be the closest northern range that we shoot. And then there's a few, Bonnyville, Fort McMurray. We go to Fort McMurray to shoot, 5.5, 6 hour drive, because there's not lots and lots of ranges around. So I would say again, just underscore, the Brooks facility is by far the best in southern Alberta, easily the best in the province as well too, because of the ease of access, asphalt right to basically the front door of the range, and all of the amenities that Brooks has to offer as well too are really, really welcome and go hand in hand with what shooters are looking for.
The economic spin-off is good for the community there, and I know our economic development team will, I think they're probably aware of it, but I'll certainly give them the pamphlet anyway, but $1 million annually, right, on that?
This is a
yeah.
recurring,
Yeah.
recurring
Yeah.
resource, it's every
Yeah.
year.
Yeah. And before I let you, anything you want from us going forward?
Well,
In
I'm-
30
Well,
seconds?
we are looking to get the 3 bays,
Yeah.
if we could, like, I know I've been told dirt's cheap, but the hauling the dirt and the manpower is the pricey part, so it's kind of what we're going after here, so.
Okay.
One of the things I've seen before, I work primarily in the transportation world and mostly do a lot of work with airports, airlines and the like. I've seen where cities or towns have an awful lot of the heavy equipment that make these things work. And I see partnerships between, obviously airports and the towns and the like to have access to equipment. And so I think as Stacy was saying, I think you have probably, we're not talking rocket science. In terms of building berms and the like, it's just an equipment issue. I think you folks are pretty rich. Yourselves and the county could also be a potential partner in this. And that's exactly what happened at Tabor. Tabor didn't have a range up until, I think it was about 2 years ago, and the county there used their equipment to make that range. It's pretty nice, pretty barren, and some nowhere near the resources of what Brooks has to offer. But for us shooters, it's another venue.
Okay, thank you for your time this afternoon. Yeah, Mr. Erickson and the other two, yeah. so-
Thank you.
Okay, I'll go to the original motion here, moved by Councillor Prentice, that the economic impact of the Brooks Pistol Club presentation be accepted as information. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, moved by Councillor Prentice that the following terms of correspondence be received as information: updates on council conferences and/or workshops, accounts payable listing, notes from the council committee on March 15th, 2022, and the report to council on the COVID-19 updates. And I'll start to my right here. Councillor Idris, anything to report? Councillor Nesbitt?
I had nothing to report, Your Honor.
Councillor Prentice? Councillor Wardrop?
Just wanted to make a note of congratulations to the Citizen of the Year and Junior Citizen of the Year for 2022. Our Citizen of the Year recipient is Reg Radke, and the Junior Citizen of the Year is Shelby Gilborn. Unfortunately, due to COVID, there will not be a gala again this year, but we're planning on having one next year, and all of the previous recipients from the last 2 years will be honored at this gala.
Okay, thank you. And for myself, Alan and I attended the Alberta Municipalities Conference in Edmonton. Many topics discovered. Big discussion again on the Alberta Police Force. Again, a lot of questions, few answers, but they did vote for a request for decision. It was presented, discussed, and amended and voted on, and it said in all, 144 representatives voted in favor, 34 against. Alberta Municipalities opposes the APPS models proposed by the PwC study and will develop an advocacy and communication strategy to advance the position. And they want to get a little bit more into that. They want to address the root causes of crime, the health, mental health, social and economic supports that are part of that. Furthermore, they want to issue a formal notice to when Alberta's contract with the RCMP is terminated, or to go, when this happens, they want to send out a referendum, or they want the government to do a referendum before they go ahead with that. But that would be up to the Alberta government to decide on that one there too. Also at that conference there, we talked about the new formula for MSI funding, the local government fiscal framework, which replaces the MSI funding in 2024. And I think Alan will know all the answers to that if you want to ask him on that. But it is, for like a layman, it is going to be confusing because they have to work with, you know, municipalities and population and assessments and regions and things like that. I don't think it's going to be an easy thing, you know, to figure out. But as long as they have municipal governments involved, or hopefully they do when they do this, whatever, we'll have something in place by 2024 there too. Also want to mention that Councillor Idris and myself were part of a group that toured the JBS plant last Thursday there. I'll just add a few things here. Maybe Councillor Idris wanted to touch base with that. They are very good corporate citizens in the community there, as we've seen with the homegrown investment of 1.3 million people for down payments on homes there too. Some of the other things that they do, they invest a lot into English as a second language. And it was interesting talking to the new manager there, Vinny. I don't know his last name, but he comes from Brazil. But he was saying that's, you know, the immigration down there's not a big issue for them down there. So the plant down in Brazil doesn't, you know, have the same issues that we have with, you know, different languages as well we would have up here. But they do invest a lot of money into that. They spend a lot of money to counter COVID, you know, which they did. You know, with the plexiglass between, you know, the cutting and the staff there. They, of course, are big sponsors for the JBS Canada Centre. They have the naming rights on that. We get money from the city on that, but more importantly, it gets their staff to use the facilities there too. Just want to talk about some challenges they have. Labor, of course, is one of the biggest ones, finding labor on that. Environmental challenges, for example, what are they going to do with their wastewater? And another challenge too is the declining cattle herd here in Alberta, and you know, it's up to, I guess, the ranchers and JBS and those meat packing plants to try to find a solution for that there too. And one last thing here too, the Silver Sage Ag Society, I talked to some government officials this afternoon. They've set March 29th for an open meeting to the public to discuss what's going on there. Since the society took over, they'll have a meeting for the general public on that date there, and then they'll set a date after that for an AGM where they will have a new board of directors at that point there too. So any questions on any of those things? Councillor Idris, did you want to add anything to our GBS tour?
The steak was good. Talking about the Ag Society, anything about the rodeo?
You know, and I haven't heard anything on the rodeo there too, and maybe we'll get some answers maybe on the 29th or after that there too. So, yeah, but a good question. I think we're all wondering about that too, yeah, so. Okay, okay, I'll go back to the original motion here. Any questions or, okay, we did that. Oh, go ahead, yeah.
Just wondering about the advocacy they're hoping to do regarding the APP. Do they have a timeline, kind of a rough timeline on what they're hoping to accomplish by when? Given that they've suggested that we defer, or not defer, but hold off on our that was the back pay.
The retro pay, no, yeah, there was no, very little discussion on that. I think everybody's, you know, continuing to work on that there, yeah, with the retro pay, yeah.
Did they give a broad timeline about what they're hoping to accomplish
For
their advocacy about?
Yeah, I can't remember on that, Alan, if you can remember on that.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Wardrop, we actually didn't even talk about the retro pay.
No, that's, which is surprising, but you're talking about the Alberta Provincial Police
Yeah,
Force.
sorry, it kind of bounced around there.
Yeah.
Just so that we can know what to watch for and when, and we can keep up with any developments they're making.
Yeah, I don't know if they put out a timeline, but I know that they're wanting more information for sure from the province, just as we did with our submission.
Yeah, and again, like, as you know, a lot of questions, very few answers on that, and so.
Thank you.
Okay, to the motion there. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, moved by Councillor Nesbitt that March 26, 2022 be hereby proclaimed as Purple Day in the city of Brooks. And that's Amanda.
Through the chair to Mayor Petrie and Council, on February 7th, City Administration received an email from the Epilepsy Association of Calgary regarding Purple Day for epilepsy awareness. Epilepsy is a condition that can happen anywhere at any time. And for this reason, a campaign to help individuals with this condition has been initiated to create an awareness of epilepsy, with March 26th being declared as International Epilepsy Awareness Day. In recognition of this day, support can be shown by wearing purple or lighting bridges, towers, and buildings up in purple. Therefore, the Epilepsy Association of Calgary respectfully requests that March 26, 2022 be hereby proclaimed as Purple Day in the City of Brooks. And just as a further note, the City of Brooks will be lighting up City Hall in purple on that day to show support for epilepsy awareness within our community.
Any questions? If we had a big sign outside the community, we could have lighted that up in purple too, eh? Okay. To the motion, all those in favor? Carried. This is the next one here, yeah. Moved by Councilor Idris that the month of April 2022 be hereby proclaimed as World Autism Month in the City of Brooks. Mr. Lucci will respond to this.
Through the Chair to Mayor and Council, thank you very much for having me this afternoon for this very important proclamation. World Autism Month is an annual campaign committed to creating a kindred, more inclusive world for people with autism, encouraging citizens to increase their understanding and acceptance of people with autism. This year, World Autism Month will be held during the month of April 2022. And through proclamation, individuals will celebrate their continued commitment to diversity and inclusion by sharing real stories of autism across all Canadian provinces and territories. World Autism Month will also shine a light on those with autism, including strengths, dreams, struggles, while inspiring individuals on the spectrum to create a more inclusive Canada. In recognition of World Autism Month, City Hall will be lit up in blue during the month of April, and it is encouraged that all homes and businesses participate in the light up blue as well, in recognition of people with autism and those who love to support them. Information material about World Autism Month can be accessed by the public at the city's website. Therefore, Therefore, staff is recommending that Council officially proclaim the month of April 2022 as World Autism Month in the City of Brooks.
Okay, any questions? Okay, to the motion, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you, Mr. Lucci. Moved by Councilor Nesbitt that Rhodus Massey be appointed to the Arts, Culture, and Heritage Board for a first two-year term commencing March 22nd, 2022 and ending March 21st, 2024. Natasha.
Thank you. Through the chair to mayor and council, the Arts, Culture, and Heritage Board's mandates to assist both council and the city in providing opportunities for arts, culture, and heritage programs, events, and facilities in the city of Brooks. The board consists of 6 citizens at large and 1 city councillor. There is currently 1 vacant citizen at large position open. The vacant position was advertised and 2 applications were received and reviewed by the board at the January 20th and February 24th meeting. Therefore, the Arts, Culture, and Heritage Board would like to forward to City Council the following motion for citizen at large. Tyler Wardrop made the motion to appoint Rhodus Massey for a first 2-year term as a citizen at large representative on the City of Brooks Arts, Culture, and Heritage Board for the City of Brooks Council. Emma Chris Aurelio seconded this motion. Therefore, staff is recommending that Rhodus Massey be appointed to the Arts, Culture, and Heritage Board for a first 2-year term commencing March 22nd, 2022 and ending March 21st, 2024.
Any questions? Again, just the appreciation for all the members that come forward to volunteer their time to sit on any of our boards here. So, yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, to the motion, all those in favor? Carried. Okay, moved by Councilor Prentice that council accept the report to council part 1.5 election finances and contribution disclosure and non-compliance of section 147.4 1 of the Local Authorities Election Act as presented for the information, and furthermore that the report be made public in accordance with section 147.81 of the Local Authorities Election Act. And I believe this is Amanda.
Thank you. Through the chair to Mayor Petrie and council, the City of Brooks Municipal General Election was held on October the 18th of 2021, and in accordance with section 147.41 of the Local Authorities Election Act, otherwise I'm going to be speaking to it as LAEA, all candidates are required to file campaign disclosure statements on or before March 1st, immediately after following a general election. 14 of the 15 candidates have filed the required campaign disclosure statements within the prescribed time. As required by the LAEA, Section 147.8, the Secretary shall transmit a report to council noting the candidates who have failed to file their campaign disclosure statements within the prescribed time. Upon receipt of the report by council, it shall be made public. Therefore, attached for council's perusal is a report to council, Local Authorities Election Act, Part 5.1, Election Finances and Contributions Disclosure and Non-Compliance of Section 147.41 of the LAEA. In addition to the above, Section 205 requires that City of Brooks notify the Alberta Election Commissioner within the reasonable time to report any act or omission that in the City of Brooks' opinion likely constitutes an offense under the Act. In the Act, Section 147.84 specifies that a candidate who falls or fails to comply with that section in filing a campaign disclosure statement within the time specified is guilty of an offense and liable to a fine of not more than $5,000. Please note that the report will be sent to the Alberta Election Commissioner following tonight's regular council meeting. Should the Secretary not transmit a report to council and notify the Alberta Election Commissioner on failure to file campaign disclosure statements, then the municipality would be in violation of the Act requirements. Therefore, the recommendation is that council accept the report to council, Part 5.1, Election Finances and Contribution Disclosure, and non-compliance of Section 147.41 of the Local Authorities Election Act as presented for information, and furthermore, that the report be made public in accordance with Section 147.81 of the Local Authorities Election Act.
Any questions? I have one, who follows up on this? Does the provincial government take over that then? Like, are they responsible for, because there'd be a fine issued there, do they do that then?
Once it goes to the Alberta Election Commissioner's office, it's up to the Alberta Election Commissioner to take it from there.
So it's out of our hands then?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, to the motion now. All those in favor? Carried. Moved by Councillor Wardrop that the city contribute $105,000 to the Francophone School soccer field, $61,000 to be funded from the Environmental Surplus Reserve, and $44,000 from the cash in lieu and municipal reserve, and the council direct staff to proceed with subdivision and land transfer. Alicia, this is yours here.
Thank you, through the chair to Mayor and Council. On February 15th, staff brought forward a request to the council committee meeting from the Francophone School Board regarding the need for a soccer field and to ask the city to provide the land and fund the construction of the field for the school board. In the meeting, council agreed to provide the $105,000 towards the soccer field and to provide the land required to build it. This information was provided to the Francophone School Board, and they have decided to proceed with constructing the soccer field. Therefore, staff is recommending that the city contribute the $105,000 to the Francophone Schools soccer field, $61,000 of it to be funded from the Environmental Surplus Reserve, and $44,000 from the cash in lieu of municipal reserve, and that council direct staff to proceed with subdivision and land transfer.
Any questions? Just a comment too, and we've contributed when I think Upland School was built to the, and Eastbrook, I think, to the playground equipment there. And I know the issue when they build a lot of the schools is the Alberta government doesn't give, they give the money for the school themselves, they don't give any money for the playgrounds or the parks, which isn't very smart, whatever. If they're gonna build something like, build it completely there. But I mean, that's out of our jurisdiction there anyway. I just wanted to bring out that point there too. Okay, to the motion, all those in favor? Carried. Okay, moved by Councillor Wardrop that the March 2022 financial variance report be accepted as information. Shelley.
Thank you, through the chair to Mayor and Council. So this report that's attached finds the city approximately 20% through the 2022 year. And I just have noted a few variances and/or events. So since my last report, the city received a Save Energy grant for $5,000 from Fortis, Alberta, and that grant was applied for and received to offset some unexpected costs of replacing one of the boilers at the Community Cultural Center building, the CCC building, which started to leak at the beginning of 2022. So the replacement of the boiler will be completed, I think, right away here, and we do anticipate the costs to be $19,200, of course, which will be offset by the above-mentioned grant. As well, the boiler in the Sparrow Arena was also in critical need of being replaced due to some unrepairable damage, and that replacement cost was $17,192, which was not anticipated in the budget, but we do anticipate that we will be able to absorb that within the city's operating budget. In regards to capital, there is no variances to report at this time, and administration recommends that this report be accepted as information.
Any questions? Okay, to the motion, all those in favor? Carried. Okay, moved by Councillor Prentice that the 2021 year-end financial report be accepted as information. You again, Shelley.
Thank you through the chair to mayor and council. So this one is a little bit more extensive. This report that I've attached is for all of 2021. So it does represent actual results for the 2021 year compared to budget. Of course, pending the results of our final audit, which is in progress at this time. So basically what I've done is just outline some highlights of the year and just really how they relate to the transfers to and from our reserves pursuant to our reserve policy. So the summary of the 2021 year-end results, so this is in regards to the departments that are funded from property taxes. So we do anticipate, we saw a surplus, a budgeted surplus of $245,108. So many of the final variances that happened throughout the year, we talked about throughout many of the reports that I did throughout 2021. And I'm just going to talk about some of the variances that are specifically funded by or transferred to specific reserves when they do happen. And that, again, pursuant to our reserve policy. So in 2021, there was a drastic reduction in interest rates that resulted in the city's interest income being $85,321 lower than budget. So these are some of the variances that will be funded by our stabilization reserve, as the interest rates is one of those. As well, we have a unfavorable variance in our RCMP contract for 2021 of approximately $133,389. So that was higher than budget, and again, that we fund from our stabilization reserve. This amount does include an additional charge of $86,600, and that represents a quarter of the salary increase for the current year. So this wouldn't be included in the upcoming retro pay amount that we're also responsible for, but it's just the adjustment of the salaries that happened in the current year. And finally, a favorable variance that we will contribute to the stabilization reserve is our snow removal costs for the year, which were approximately $169,954 lower than budget. And of course, that's because we had fewer snow events. So again, these variances were either funded from or transferred to the stabilization reserve. And in regards to that reserve, we also transfer 25% of the remaining budgeted surplus. Now, when I speak of the remaining budgeted surplus, I'm referring to the surplus after these final reserve transfers take place pursuant to the policy. In this year, the remaining surplus is actually higher than the $245,108, and that's due to some of the negative variances that were eligible to be funded from the reserves at the end of the year. So we kind of ended up with a remaining budget variance of about $290,499. So just moving on. Again, I'm still talking about the departments funded from property tax. So ATCO gas franchise fees, they were lower than budgeted by $35,900, and the Fortis fees were higher than budget by just over $56,600. So that created a net favorable variance of $20,748, and that amount pursuant to the policy is transferred to the Vehicle Equipment Replacement Reserve, along with sale proceeds for capital assets that we collected in the year of $75,670, and 12.5% of the remaining budgeted surplus that I spoke of before. So the total amount transferred at the end of the year to the Vehicle Equipment Replacement Reserve was $132,730. Just a few other reserve transfers that aren't specifically related to the policy in this case, but throughout the year, the city received approximately $1,142,000 from the County of Renewal pursuant to the Intermunicipal Collaboration Framework, or the ICF agreements. Of that amount, $602,000, just over $602,000, had not been anticipated in the budget. So that incremental amount that we weren't anticipating in our 2021 budget has been transferred to the operating contingency reserve for future use. As well, in the 2021 budget, the city anticipated to use about $704,950 from our operating contingency reserve to offset the reduction of recreation revenues due to COVID closures, restrictions, and relief measures. Although the revenues were in fact significantly decreased, we also found that there was a large favorable variances in our recreation operating expenses due to those closures. So as a result of this, only $97,176 was required from the reserves, and that was to cover our lost revenues and to bring us to a zero budget variance in recreation. So going back to some of the reserve transfers from the policy, 12.5% of the remaining budget surplus was also transferred to the operating contingency reserve in the amount of $36,312. The cost to power streetlights we found was $93,000, just over $93,000 over budget due to the rate change that took effect upon the transfer of ownership some years ago, the transfer of ownerships of the lights to Fortis, Alberta. This amount is funded from the Land Development Reserve pursuant to the decision of council at the time of that transfer. And finally, 50% of the remaining budgeted surplus was transferred to the Council Projects Reserve in the amount of $145,249. So that kind of summarizes the reserve transfers and some of the variances in our tax-supported departments. I'll now talk about water. So we do budget to transfer reserves, and so I'll just, in water, the final transfer to reserve, so our anticipated surplus going to reserve, and typically it's put in those reserves so we can replace some of our capital infrastructure. So that reserve transfer was $17,618 higher than anticipated. So the reserve transfer was budgeted at $556,903, and the actual transfer was $574,521. We noted that most of that was due to higher revenues as a result of higher consumption due to a very hot summer and increased irrigation needs. And of course, it was offsetted by the treated water that we purchased which was also higher than anticipated because of consumption. Surface irrigation, the final transfer to reserve was about $33,330 lower than anticipated. The reserve transfer that was budgeted was $48,050, so we actually only transferred a very small amount, about $142 to that reserve. And this is due to lower surface irrigation fees collected mostly due to some of our city spaces using treated water for irrigation. So although the water charges were there, they were to treated water as opposed to the surface irrigation raw water department. In sewer, the final transfer to reserve was $179,646 higher than anticipated. The reserve transfer budgeted was $304,507, and the actual was $484,153. And this is mostly due to lower salaries and wages than we allocated in the budget, and also lower costs in relation to maintaining lift stations. Garbage and recycling, the budgeted transfer to reserve was $84,600, sorry, that should be the final transfer to reserve, was $84,683 higher than what we had budgeted. So our reserve transfer was budgeted at $142,979, and actual was $227,662. The reason for that primarily was salaries and wages being lower than the amount that was allocated in the budget, and some higher bin rental fees collected, offset by increasing costs related to the garbage trucks. So in regards to the capital budget, most of the major projects budgeted for 2021 were completed within budget. Just have a couple of noted variances. Our water main replacement program was $82,500 under budget for the year. And the BMS system at the JBS Canada Centre was about $12,000 under budget. And that project was originally budgeted in 2020 and finished this year. So we had carried forward the budget from 2020. The remaining budgets for projects that weren't completed in 2021 have now been carried forward to the 2022 budget. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Hopefully it wasn't too confusing. And administration is recommending that this report be accepted as information.
Any questions? Councillor Wardrop.
Thanks for the report, and you do lay it out so nicely. So easy to understand, I hope. I hope I ask a question that proves that I understand this now, Shelley. Okay, so my question is about the reserve policy. So, because our reserves look pretty healthy from what I remember from our budgeting. Is there a certain point where we, I guess, don't transfer these surpluses over to our reserves and take a look at what we're, like, look at our property taxes, I guess, because, you know, if we're looking really good, our reserves are looking really healthy, and we're seeing a lot of surplus, what does our policy say about, you know, stopping putting the money into reserves and then relooking at our tax rate? If that makes sense.
I think I have an answer for you.
Okay.
So through the chair to Councillor Wardrop. So we do not have any maximums on our reserves or minimums set on our reserve transfers. But I think the idea behind the reserve policy is to transfer unexpected surpluses. So the best practice is when we look at our results of the year, and we want to put that through to our budget process so that we can adjust budget figures so that they're more realistic if we see big surpluses going in or out of reserves. So it gives us a tool to adjust our budget for the next year.
And if we're able to increase revenues and things like that, that will affect our tax, what we collect in taxes. So that's really how it should flow through. So, you know, I think we try to do that. Obviously, there's always, budgeting is based on estimates. So sometimes our estimates aren't always right, or there's unpredictable things that happen. But typically, the reserve policy should just be where we put our unexpected surpluses, with the exception of water, sewer, surface irrigation, and garbage, because our policy basically anticipates that we transfer to reserves at least the amount equal to amortization, so that we are building up funds to replace our infrastructure. So that's, again, we like to try and make sure that our budget reflects what's actually going to happen and that those reserves can happen. And if not, then we look at either increasing or decreasing the rates, but.
Yeah, and another one,
Hopefully
a
that-
good example would be snow removal too, is because, okay, this year we've had, I think it was 125,000 with hardly any snow, so you kind of build that up. Next year, you know, we might get hit with, 25 snowstorms, and then we might have a deficit in that too, so you have to sort of build, so I think that's sort of another example, right?
Yeah, through the chair to Mayor Petrie, we often do have lots of things go in and out of the stabilization reserve, and that's exactly what it's for, so that we don't have to adjust our tax rate every time. And it's designed so that it's based on expenditures that we can't really predict what's going to happen, because it's based on environmental factors, obviously a snowfall and things like that. So.
Any other questions? Councillor Prentice?
On the streetlight one there for that 93,000, when they took that back or took it over, is that going to be a yearly thing? It's going to be up and over that 100,000 a year? Or is that just, can't remember, I thought there was a buyout period or something on that. Is that part of this, or was it just strictly power?
Through the chair to Councillor Prentice, I wish I could remember a little bit more, but I believe that it's a new permanent rate. And I don't know if Alan can remember. However, I will say that this is something too, we'll look at the budget. We may have to adjust the streetlight electricity expense, which we didn't do this year, to accommodate just basic inflation. But we did, when we transferred over the streetlights, have to go to a new higher rate, which we were anticipating would cost us more.
That would be the cost then. That would be the extra cost then.
Yes, that's correct. But I think Alan has.
Yeah, go ahead, Alan.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Prentice. At the time that we did transfer those assets to, they gave us a large sum of money, and it's that money that we put in that reserve because we were aware that these charges were going to be higher. The other thing that's on there too, I believe, is a rate rider, because we went to the LED lights, and I think that'll come off. I can't remember what the period for that was, but it was maybe 10 years or so.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, to the motion, all those in favor? Carried. Thank you, Shelley. Moved by Councillor Prentice that council endorse a letter of support signed by the mayor for an application by the Brooks region to become a designated community under the renewal stream of the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program. Lisa.
Thank you. Through the chair to mayor and council, recognizing the linkage between labor capacity and economic development, the Brooks region is applying for a community designation under the Rural Renewal stream of the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program. The Rural Renewal stream is a new program through the government of Alberta that uses a community-driven approach. Foreign applicants will be able to apply for some of the hard-to-fill vacancies in our community, for example, veterinarians, healthcare workers, etc. And if hired, the region would endorse the applicant for permanent residency. In order to apply for the program, each partner municipality is being asked to supply a letter of support, and staff is recommending that council endorse the application with a letter of support signed by the mayor.
Any questions? Councillor Idris?
Lisa, in the package, there was a fact sheet, and it mentions that it is for people who are already in Alberta. Can you elaborate if that's the case, or?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Idris, it's my understanding that either a foreign applicant can apply for the position or a person who's already living in Alberta but doesn't have permanent residency can apply for the positions as well. And either way, our community would be able to sponsor their residency.
And when you say the Brooks region, that's us in the county, Renewal, Dutchess, Rosemary, and Bazzano too, everybody included in that, which is good, yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Councillor Idris?
So how do you see this, like, let's say we apply and we get accepted into the program. How do you see this moving forward in terms of actual implementation?
Through the chair to Councillor Idris, in my vision, the implementation would be done collaboratively throughout the region through the creation of a kind of a workforce development committee. We completed a workforce development study in 2020, and one of the recommendations from that study was to create a small committee with informed individuals from the region to address specific skills gaps, long-term youth retention for positions, ensuring that there were sufficient educational opportunities and so on for specific labor issues that had been identified in the study. And I think that this program could be very easily handled by a small group like that would report back to joint services. So once the positions, or once were approved, let's say, the Brooks region and this workforce development committee would have to reach out to local employers to talk about what kind of positions or vacancies exist, and would have to then have the tough decision of deciding which positions they would like to include to be posted internationally. And that decision would have to be based on where the largest impact is going to be, what the greatest need is, and so on. Once those positions are posted and applicants start coming in, then the committee would sponsor them, the selected applicants for residency, and we would get to work on the settlement and retention of such applicants. So that's when the local settlement agencies and organizations like the Chamber of Commerce and FCSS would come into play. So it really is, it's a decently large project, and there will be a lot of players at the table.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, to the motion then. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you, Lisa. Okay, moved by Councillor Idris that bylaw number 2204 being a bylaw of the City of Brooks in the province of Alberta to establish a Recreation and Parks Board be introduced and read a first time.
That's me.
Amanda, okay.
Through the chair to Mayor Petrie and Council, administration has recently updated the Recreation and Parks Board bylaw, and the following changes are being recommended, stating that the youth member must be at least 14 years old, as recommended by the board, adding that the board is responsible for monitoring and implementing the 10-year Recreation and Parks Master Plan, subject to the city's budget, as per the recommendation in the master plan, removing the requirement to participate in the city's budget planning process, as this is not current practice, updating how to address procedural requirements, special meeting requirements, and virtual meeting to align with other city bylaws, and adding a duty to review grant applications and award funding from time to time as directed by council because of the Recreation User Group Grant, otherwise known as RUG. However, this has been kept general in case there are other grants and grant programs to be allocated in the future. Therefore, administration is recommending that bylaw 2204 be read 3 times and adopted.
Any questions? Okay, to the motion. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, moved by Councillor Nesbitt that bylaw 2204 be read a second time. All those in favor? Carried. Moved by Councillor Idris that bylaw 2204 be given 3 readings at this meeting. It has to be carried unanimously. All those in favor? Carried. Moved by Councillor Wardrop that bylaw number 2204 being a bylaw of the City of Brooks in the province of Alberta to establish a Recreation and Parks Board be read a 3rd time and adopted. Any questions? All those in favor? Carried. Okay, moved by Councillor Wardrop that bylaw number 2206 being a bylaw of the City of Brooks this is the next one here. In the province of Alberta to amend bylaw 2112, being a bylaw for the regulation and control of cemeteries, be introduced and read a first time. Amanda?
Thank you. Through the chair to Mayor Petrie and council, administration is proposing changes to the cemetery bylaw to allow for the installation of burial plot columbariums within the cemetery after receiving a request from a family to install the structure shown in the attached photo or example. A definition of burial plot columbarium has been added to the bylaw, and the construction, installation, and approval of these will follow the current process for monuments. These structures have been installed in other cemeteries, however, are not currently permitted within the city's bylaw. And as an amendment is required to allow similar structures in place of a monument, this has been added. So an additional subsection is being added to address how marker sizes are determined, which is dependent on the type of burial plot, i.e. cremation versus casket plot. Therefore, administration is recommending that bylaw 2206 be read 3 times and adopted.
Any questions? Okay, to the motion, all those in favor? Carried. Moved by Councillor Prentice that bylaw 2206 be read a second time. All those in favor? Carried. Moved by Councillor Nesbitt that bylaw 2206 be given 3 readings at this meeting, has to be carried unanimously. All those in favor? Carried. Moved by Councillor Idris that bylaw number 2206 being a bylaw of the City of Brooks in the province of Alberta to amend bylaw 2112 being a bylaw for the regulation and control of cemeteries be read a 3rd time and adopted. Any questions? All those in favor? Carried. Okay, moved by Councillor Nesbitt that bylaw 2207 being a bylaw of the City of Brooks in the province of Alberta to establish an Arts, Culture, and Heritage Board be introduced and read a first time. Amanda.
Thank you. Through the chair to Mayor Petrie and council, administration has recently updated the Arts, Culture, Heritage Board bylaw to align with other city bylaws that create various boards, committees, and commissions. The following changes are being recommended: increasing the number of board members from 7 to 8 to allow for a youth member and providing a term length, updating quorum, resignation, and membership, i.e. living within Brooks requirement to align with other city bylaws, updating the number of meetings held per year from at least quarterly to not less than 10 per year, adding how to address procedural requirements, special meeting requirements, and virtual meetings to align with other city bylaws, adding a duty to review grant applications and award funding from time to time as directed by council, as recent funding was provided to the Arts, Culture, Heritage Board in the 2022 budget, removal of the requirement for board members to follow the city's code of conduct policy. Changes to the MGA now require a municipality to enact a bylaw that provides for a code of conduct and not a policy, and clarifying that the city is signing an administrative authority over all checks, vouchers, and monies received and spent, and that the board members do not have authority to commit funding. Therefore, administration is recommending that bylaw 2207 be read 3 times and adopted.
Okay, any questions? All those in favor? Carried. Moved by Councillor Nesbitt that bylaw 2207 be read a second time. All those in favor? Carried. Moved by Councillor Prentice that bylaw 2207 be given 3 readings at this meeting. It has to be carried unanimously. All those in favor? Carried. Moved by Councillor Wardrop that bylaw number 2207 being a bylaw of the City of Brooks in the province of Alberta to establish an Arts, Culture, and Heritage Board be read a 3rd time and adopted. All those in favor? Carried. Moved by Councillor Idris that bylaw number 2208 being a bylaw of the City of Brooks in the province of Alberta to set a rate for the business tax levy for businesses located in the Brooks Town Center Revitalization Zone be introduced and read a first time. Amanda.
Through the chair to Mayor Petrie and council, annually as required by bylaw 9126 and amendments, council must consider the annual budget as prepared by the board of directors of the BRZ and provide notice to the ratepayers of the budget consideration at its regular meeting to be held April 4th, 2022, and annually pass a bylaw to set a rate for a business tax levy on businesses located in the Brooks Town Center Business Revitalization Zone. Attached is the bylaw for 2022, showing the assessed value for the Business Revitalization Zone, the approved budget by the BRZ Board, and the mill rate that will be applied to ratepayers of the BRZ. Therefore, Bylaw 2208 is being presented for first reading, and after first reading is approved, notices will be sent to ratepayers with a copy of the budget and new mill rate. Ratepayers are invited to submit any concerns to administration prior to the April 4th council meeting, as a public hearing will be held before the bylaw is given second reading and third readings.
Any questions? And maybe, Alan, just a clarification, for 2020 and 2021, we bypassed, or we gave the BRZ merchants a holiday with that, right?
That's correct. We waived the business taxes after we passed the bylaw.
Yeah, okay. Okay, to the motion, all those in favor? Carried. Okay, moved by Councilor Idris that the meeting adjourn at 6:10 p.m. What's that? No, I don't, questions from the media? Oh. No, she's not there. Okay. To the motion then. All those in favor? Okay.